Let's give them a hand as they come on up. I will have you guys introduce yourself.
I'm Robin Phillips. I directed this thing and wrote it with this guy.
I'm Scott Baba. I wrote it with that guy.
I'm Shyam, and I am one of the producers.
Yep. So we'll just chat about the film, a little bit about how it all got together with the hopes of you guys getting inspired to create your own projects. So it starts with story and script always, because if you don't have that, then you don't have a film. So how did that come to be?
Kind of came about from two things. Scott and I, for the longest time, have been just kicking around this idea of, wouldn't it be cool if there was like an airship, but like a Star Destroyer?
We do like airships.
Yeah, like I'd never seen an airship actually really played up as an evil Star Destroyer before. But, that wasn't really a story, so that was like, oh, that's a cool idea. And then I, just kind of went away. And just kind of randomly, I was in one of it was the first semester writing class at USC. And just after I'd finished some other exercise, I was doodling around with what was the opening scene of this movie, which, I didn't really know what it was. I just thought, crazy bar brawl. And we end on this moment. It's like, wait a minute, this fight was actually over a person, over a child. That sounds interesting. And then I went, hey, Scott, might that work in the airship thing?
Yeah, and then we took that, and how long? We spent like 2 years?
Kicking that thing around,
Yeah.
And then kind of infused it with my own insecurities about the fact that all of my friends are now having kids and everything. And kids are scary little people to me. And it just kind of was like, well, I can use that as a core of an emotional arc, can't I? All right, let's do it.
And then I infused it with slapstick.
Nice. Did you guys always knew it was a short, thinking feature? What was kind of the thought process around that as you start writing?
This version was always meant to be a short. Okay. Because this was, I was in the USC MFA film program. And, the culmination of that, if you want to be a writer-director, is you do a thesis film. And this was this was kind of well, this is really big. This would be an insane thing to try. Why not? Let's write it and see, can we do basically an 8-sequence short film that is an action-adventure movie that could be a prototype for an actual theatrical franchise?
In fact, one of our biggest problems as a short was that as we were writing it, and part of the problem during those 2 years was that it kept inflating to much bigger than it needed to be, and we had to keep cutting it down, and then we added more stuff, and then cutting it down again.
It kept trying to be a feature, and we're like, no. We don't have that kind of money. We're not going to have that kind of money. We got to figure out a way to do this and this is somehow manageable, but at the same time is, showing off basically that we can do a Lucasfilm old-style 80s adventure movie.
Talk a little bit about that process, because a lot of people struggle with that. They try to cram too much into a short, and it doesn't work. So what was the process for you guys like to go, okay, how do we trim, how do we cut, how do we make this?
The long story short is I cram things in, and then he cuts it out, so...
I'm kind of, my talent is structure, and his talent is character and zaniness. So, I'll put down the structure of something. He'll write this great infused, character-infused thing.
That's like 12 pages long.
For what should be 1 page. And then I'll have to go through and trim it down. Then he gets mad at me for about a week.
Yeah, pretty mad.
Yeah. And, we go back and forth from there. With this, we also, once we had gotten to a point where the script was around, I want to say it was like 35 pages. And the finished actual movie itself is only about 23. The credits are just 6 minutes long because about 500 people worked on this thing. But we actually storyboarded everything after maybe the 5th or 6th draft. And I worked with my editor, and we actually put the whole thing into Avid. And we recorded voiceover and everything with it, and we started playing it through. Is this working? And we would find things, wow, this is really dragging. Even though we recorded it and we thought it was funny at the time and it's great, okay, that goes bye-bye. Or, wait a minute, something doesn't make any sense to people. Okay, we should add something. And that was invaluable.
Yeah. How then when did you know you were ready to start getting the pre-production, getting producers involved? When was that process for you guys to go, okay, we got something here that we're ready to move forward with?
I kind of think when we put the script around to our friends and they liked it, as opposed to going, okay, that's cool. You know, frequently you'll put a draft of something in front of someone and they'll go, oh yeah, that was cool. And then you ask, out of curiosity, what was the page number you stopped at? You know, if it's a feature and they say they stopped at like page 30, you know you have a problem. This one, you know, we kind of knew this was working when people would actually sit through a full 30 pages in one sitting and go, dude, that was awesome. When can we do this?
So talk about that process, getting producers involved. It sounds like you guys went to school together, so.
Well,
Those two.
Yes.
Those two did.
Sorry.
Yeah, we went to school together. I'm getting producers involved. There was a lot of, like he said, kind of getting the script around and kind of finding people that were crazy enough to try to do this project as a producer because of the fact that when we started this, we were still in school and we had no money because, you know, the school takes all your money. So that's just how it works.
We still have no money.
So we were able to find people that were willing to try this. And that kind of came together, and most of us still work together still on various other projects, which is really cool. But yeah, it was kind of getting people that really like the script. Like you said, that's what it really starts with. If you're passionate about the script, you try to make it happen.
Well,
That's what it is.
yeah, and I think the biggest thing for you and like for Sev was that, and this was one of the ways we got a lot of the effects guys on board too, was that it was like, hey, we want to basically do some Star Wars shit. Yeah. We're just going to do something crazy. We're going to see if we can do this. Who wants in? And that just wound up bringing not just, you know, our producers on board, but that brought, you know, a friend of a friend from when I was an undergraduate who happened to run a G&E company was like, dude, this is cool. I'm not doing anything these 2 weeks. You want an 18-wheeler full of equipment? I was like,
There were a lot of friend of friends involved.
yes. But, you know, like just kind of stepping out there and saying we want to try something really crazy and really cool got a whole lot of people excited to come on board and, you know, just see if we could do it.
That was a really, really good tool for us, actually, is just telling people that, you know, this is something that people have told us that we probably can't do, so we're going to do it anyways. And I think that pitch was really attractive to some people because in some ways I think that's what making movies is kind of all about sometimes, especially when you're kind of at the lower level of it. So, yeah, we had a great team on this, like good producers and everyone else.
Did you have to, how much money did you have to raise? You don't have to give me numbers, but just kind of talk about that process of the money you did have to raise.
So the money for this came from a couple different sources. A lot of it was private investment, again, just by kind of shopping it around to see who would support the film, support us. And then we also kickstarted a bunch of the post. And the reason we kickstarted the post was because that made more sense because once you actually have something in the can that you can show people, it's much easier to raise money on Kickstarter, which is a pretty difficult medium of fundraising, to be honest, as a filmmaker, although it is successful all the time. But it was a bunch of random sources and also a lot of donated work. I don't want to reveal numbers, but the budget for this is actually incredibly small. It's barely even 6 digits. And we were able to pull it off because we were able to get a lot of people just to help us out making it, including people all the way from, you know, really famous miniature makers to, you know, big studios and all kinds of people just by kind of saying, hey, do you want a piece of this? And a lot of people responded, yeah, which is awesome.
Which, talk about that. This is, special effects is insane on this. It's a short film. And then we were talking back in the green room that you guys didn't have any experience with that. So
Yeah.
talk about kind of the learning curve with that a little bit.
We had no real experience to speak of for this, which was kind of, you know, one of the reasons it was like, are we doing this? I guess we're doing this. And one of, you know, kind of one of the fun things that we always wanted to do with this was to use miniatures and practical effects, which, you know, initially seemed like that was just not going to happen. But kind of through a random thing that was happening through it wasn't the film school, it was through something else at USC. Matthew Gratzner and Ian Hunter, the guys that run the New Deal model shop, they did all the stuff for Interstellar. They were doing a lecture on some of the stuff they had done for, I guess it was Inception at the time. And, you know, I randomly just decided to go to that, you know, got to know those guys a little bit there. And, you know, so it was like, okay, so this is kind of in the realm of possibility. I probably shouldn't ask these guys for help. Okay, so I got to go find people that used to work for them. Nice. And our production designer actually used to build models at New Deal Studios. And kind of through that, and we started to put together a team that could actually do this practical effects work. And it was kind of one step in, one foot in front of the other, because we were like, okay, we've got one guy that can help us build models. Okay. And then, we sent over a bunch of materials of like, look, here's what we've done of the movie thus far. And that actually got New Deal to actually help out with the construction of the models and help donate some resources.
Did we know he worked for New Deal before we got him?
Not really.
Jason? I was...
Barely.
Not really.
The thing that worked out for us on this was we didn't actually have a plan of how we were going to do the VFX. We just knew that we were going to do it no matter what it took.
We thought we had a plan, and we didn't actually have a plan.
Kind of. The plan was like, this might work. But in the process of just trying to do it, we were able to meet so many people that want to help out with it that eventually it just came together. It did take us, as Rob mentioned, quite a bit of time to put it all together. But just because we were trying to do it, we were able to get it done.
And
we learned it.
It did turn into a lot of, hey, you guys just built this awesome thing. Hey, you know who you should talk to? Exactly. This guy up in Sonoma, he's got a motion control rig. He's got one of the old Kerner ILM rigs. Okay, let's go talk to him. Hey, do you have that thing working? No, but you want to come up and help us get it working and we'll shoot stuff for your movie? Okay. Yeah. There was a lot of like, each step and each person we met that like, the work we were doing was making people actually excited and impressing them. That actively led to the next step. So, we kind of would have an idea of what we think we were going to do. And fortunately, just by doing good work, it turned out that opened more doors for us as we met people.
Nice. Because of this process, how long was the kind of pre-production process for you guys? How long was it before you actually started shooting?
Actual pre-production from the moment we decided we were actually going to do this to doing it was probably only about 3 or 4 months. Again, like the biggest things were just making sure the story was good. Making sure the story was good and then figuring out how to actually go union, because by going union, it actually wound up, it kind of let everybody know in the casting sessions that we weren't screwing around. Yeah. And as a result, we wound up getting a much better talent pool than if we had just been non-union. Hey, we're just kind of doing stuff. Yeah.
Which is a great segue into casting. Talk about how you got Jackie Salito on board, and then we'll talk a little bit about the audition process.
I went to undergraduate with Jackie Salito back at Chapman. And she had been the casting director for my buddy Kyle Higgins' thesis film. And so, we just knew her, and I was like, hey, you did a great job with that. Can you help? And she was like, yeah, well, what do you want to do? And let's see who we can find.
Awesome. And then in the writing process, do you guys have visual ideas about these characters and waiting for those people to kind of walk in and be that? Or are you just kind of open to see whoever kind of comes
We
in
had
the door?
some cartoony sketches, like Fred was always going to be this kind of really lanky, tall guy. Shorty was always going to be, a port short Scotsman. And Ronnie
was always going to be an insane
he was always heroic.
scarecrow.
No. Fred.
No, I'm sorry. The King, Mortimer.
Oh,
my apologies. Again.
King Mortimer was always just going to be as crazy as we could make him.
And Camden does that very well. Love Camden.
Camden just walked right into that session, and it was just like, it's Camden, isn't it? We're going with this guy. We're going with this guy. We're going with this guy.
And so that's the next question is, how do you, as the people on the other side of the table to enlighten the actors, when do you kind of know? When do you know, like, this is the person versus that's the person? If they all do good jobs, how do you kind of land on that one?
I think it's, it really is, it's very subjective. It's very much, did this person feel right to me? We had several folks in the auditions who were fantastic, but they just didn't feel quite right. So, except for Camden. Camden was just like, and it's him. But it really was when the right guys walked in, and we did test like the groups together. We mixed and matched people during the casting sessions to see how they played. And once we landed on this mixture, it was like, I think it's these guys.
And we didn't always agree on everything. I remember Shorty, we had a conflict where I wanted this other guy really badly. He was like this.
You did, and he was really good, but he just was not as goofy as
but
Jason.
I saw him as a more serious role when we were writing it, and so like I was fighting for this other guy, and you guys wanted this sort of goofier, sort of sillier guy.
You wanted a straight man for the comic relief, man. We had to go silly.
And I got outvoted, so.
It's always a struggle. It's always a debate. Let's jump into production a little bit. How many your days? How many days did you shoot? Did you do rehearsals?
Did effectively 1/2 day of rehearsal. I don't like, for me, especially if I know that I'm not going to have a lot of takes, I actually like to kind of meet with everybody ahead of time, but I don't like to do rehearsals because if I get too far into the rehearsal and I get exactly what I want in rehearsal, and then I know I'm only going to have a handful of shooting days, sometimes it's hard to get back to that magic. So I've always found that I like to get really close in rehearsal and know exactly, okay, I know what I'm going to push them to, but then I actually, we get on set on the day, let the talent kind of do what they want on the first, because if you've cast everybody right, like they already are basically on the same page as you, and so the first take you're always going to get something that's like is very, very usable, and then it's just like nudging people where you kind of want to go. So that was the approach with this, because we had a fair number of shooting days for a short film. We had 12 shooting days. Some of them were kind of painful because we had to rotate on and off of night twice. Because to film in that bar, that was a real bar, and we had to shoot from 4 a.m. to 4 p.m., and that was just murder on everybody.
Yeah, actually, everything in that film is pretty much shot on location.
Yeah.
So we were all over Los Angeles, and also the airplane is a real airplane sitting in the Chino airport. Someone just owns an airplane that doesn't fly, but we found them, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can shoot here. We don't make any money from this."
The interior of the airplane, the exterior
Yeah,
of the
the
little
exterior is
model.
a miniature. And then on top of the 12 production days, we spent about 2 weeks shooting the miniatures.
Oh, it was
up
8
north.
days.
It was
8 days. It was 8 straight, painful,
Yeah.
17-hour days camped out in a shed in Sonoma with this giant motion control rig that was built at ILM in 1991 and had this lovely thing called the Zone of Death where you could accidentally input infinity as a power input into its motors. And if you did that, it would actually start violently shaking around trying to smash things. It would go into like destroy all humans mode.
This thing was built in like the 90s. Like there's a reason they don't have it anymore, but it was great for us.
Well, it had been designed so that like you would definitely get the shot, and then someone could hit the emergency power kill button. So there was always this like looming threat that the robot was going to kill us while we were filming, which was great. And also just to know that it's like, yep, this thing has been threatening people since basically since Jurassic Park, that it would kill them. And it was on the Star Wars prequels and everything, and we're just like, yep, dangerous robot. Yes.
It's a nice little film history kind of thing for you to have an experience with, to go, yeah, we're kind of participating in something that's been around. And
It still had all these random things on it from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The operator was very proud that it had once plowed right into the Black Pearl.
Yeah, it was covered in crabs from pirates for some reason. They just thought that they should put a bunch of little crabs all over it.
Yeah,
Which I guess made it less like deadly feeling kind of, but also really creepy in like a weird way.
It was fun. I love that rig. It was a lot of fun because like when you're shooting with motion control, it's really slow to get the exposures you need, but you wind up, you're watching the frames come in as you're doing it. So you're actively getting basically your renders, for lack of a better term, almost instantly. And with the models, it was just, what we would do is we'd shoot the model lit the way we want it to look. Then we would actually just darken the model and light up the green screen. And we would pull the green key off of that one where the vehicle was silhouetted. So we basically instantly had the matte for the model. And then we could just slap the background right in there. We had tracking data off the motion control rig that worked in Maya. So we basically could just slap the shot right together, and we were 80% of the way there already, right there on the day, versus what it can be in CG. If any of you guys have worked with it, sometimes it can be a very slow process to get something that looks photoreal. Whereas this was starting with photoreal and then trying to push fantastical.
This still takes a long time though, believe me. Like it was, Rob says 8 days, but it was like 15, 16, 18-hour days of us switching off and like sleeping on floors and stuff to get it done. But that being said, we're fans of practical effects too. We think practical effects have their place and CG has its place, and putting it together gets the best results. So
well, and we did all our explosions practically. Those were it cost us just shy of $1,500 in total to do all of our explosions at 4K practically in a parking lot in Los Angeles City. And it would have taken us weeks to render that. Especially, that was another thing. This film was actually finished at 4K. This was obviously a 1080 Blu-ray, but doing things for Ultra HD requires 4 times the computing processing power because of the resolution. And doing so much of this practically let us, it let us do something at 4K. And it also just led us to, the New Deal guys who we're now friends with, led us to Fawn Davis, who was one of the lead miniature makers. He did on like Elysium,
Elysium, Star Wars,
on the Star Wars prequels, all this crazy stuff. And those are all great lasting relationships that just came out of, hey, you want to do something cool, guys?
And we got to spend a whole day just blowing stuff up in the middle of Los Angeles, which is kind of a filmmaker's dream, honestly. I mean, isn't that why we try and make movies?
I'm still shocked that I got
Legally.
TSA pre-background check clearance after all the Google searches we did to make this movie.
No one went to jail yet.
Nice. Talk a little post-production. What was your process? Did you have a plan for it? Obviously, you had to raise some more money. Kind of talk about how that process worked for you guys.
As far as the budget for post, we had a much better idea of how we were going to do post once we kind of started the process, which is, not how you're supposed to make a movie, but for us it was in this situation. So we looked at it and we said, okay, well, we need to raise X amount of dollars for post, which is kind of part of the plan, and we kickstarted it, which if we had tried to kickstart the initial investment, I don't think it would have been as successful. But because we had already built out the team of talent and we already had a bunch of cool stuff, it was actually relatively easy. And by relatively easy, I mean Kickstarter is still very difficult. To raise that money on Kickstarter, we went over our goal for post by, I think, 20%, which is great. But that was about 2 months of continuous work of just pushing it around, marketing it, finding the right people and whatnot. But that was the budget for that. And at that point, we had actually met many of the people that were going to help us do the post. So we had a pretty good idea of what it would cost. And it was actually incredibly inexpensive for us at that point because we had so much support from people to actually get this project done. We also were able to collaborate with a lot of people, like students, various other facilities. It became an educational project for 2 different schools and a lot of people around the world. And it was really nice, actually, how many people were just down to do it, to make it a part of their curriculum at their schools, and all kinds of stuff like that.
Talk a little about that. That's
so, there are very few schools that are up to the capability to push out consistently quality work for visual effects. And what we stumbled into finding through actually a buddy's, a friend of mine. So I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I've got a buddy who has this VFX shop called CT SF up there. And some of the guys there recommended we talk to one of their old professors at the Academy of Art University. And the Academy of Art University has this weird little thing within it called 400A, or I think they're now called Studio X or something. And basically the talent that teaches the courses are all former ILM guys. Or some of them are even current ILM guys who just aren't on a show. And they basically donate services to low-budget features. They do a lot of Sundance stuff, like they did the VFX for Fruitvale Station. And basically they do stuff for either stuff that is not for profit or is just it's really cool, really low budget, and clearly can't pay what it would normally cost to do visual effects. And in this case, we walked in and we're like, hello, we're doing stuff with miniatures. And they got really excited because they never get miniatures. Because miniatures, it requires a stage and all this other stuff. So they're used to doing a lot of things with CG. But this meant that they could be doing hybrid visual effects that would up the ante for their students' work and help get those students jobs. And I think that program has some insane placement rate. Almost everybody I worked with when we were doing this there, they're working at ILM, they're working at MPC, they're working at all these places. And so we were just fortunate enough that they thought this was really cool. And they were like, yeah, we'll donate services. Bring us shots. I was like, oh, okay, well, we will bring you shots.
Nice. And then was this for your thesis project? Is that how it ended up for? And then just kind of talk about what's kind of maybe the goals afterwards. Did you talk about the film festival thing for you guys? Talk a little bit about Blu-rays and just kind of the whole package deal with the post-production to give people an idea?
The project started off as a thesis, but then it quickly ballooned into an independent project because we got so many other people involved. So it was not really a thesis project in the end of it at all. It started there, but it took us time to do it. And by the end of it, it was an independent project.
Yeah, it's very atypical at the USC Film School to get away with explosions, real aircraft, 130 visual effects shots, 4K, which was not a supported resolution they could handle at the time. So we kind of, especially once we got into post-production, we put together a team, like Alex McLean, who was one of our other producers and our post-production supervisor, put together, he did post-production supervision for theatrical features for a living. So what did he do? He put together a badass, pipeline so that everything was simplified, streamlined, our color science was always on the money, and that we hit all of our deliverables exactly the way to specification they were supposed to go. So we had, 4K DCP in, the P3 lookup table color space, the true theatrical color range. We did, this stuff in proper Rec 709. The other stuff is spec'd for Ultra HD, Rec 2020, all that fun stuff. Sorry, Shyam, I kind of slipped in there with techno babble.
No, it's totally fine. That's all important stuff. We try to make it as professional as possible. And then you wonder about festivals, right? Like,
That's the point. Is so many people who are doing their first time project don't realize all that when it's too late or not having that information ahead of time. So that's kind of something that I was.
And it is worth spending the time, and if you need to spend a little bit of extra money on finding the right guys to make sure that, okay, we can get our sound mix done right, and that we get it delivered both for theatrical and for broadcast. And one thing that you have to watch out for is sometimes in an environment like this, you might think of this as a theatrical type environment. Well, the playback system isn't going to be set up that way. Even if you go into a movie theater that they're running a Blu-ray off of, they're actually going to be playing broadcast level audio. Even though they won't tell you that, they'll tell you, oh, it's theatrical because they're in a theater. If you play theatrical level audio off Blu-ray in a normal movie theater, it will sound crunched and really messed up. So you actually need to give them the correct, what you would put on a normal Blu-ray or DVD for television. But your DCP will actually have to be spec'd for theatrical levels. Otherwise, that will then sound weird and get all screwy.
And also, getting this type of stuff done, it can be, and oftentimes is very expensive, but if you have something good enough, you can get it done. Like the sound mixing for this, and the work of that was done at Paramount with Technicolor.
Yeah.
And that was done, I actually email pitched it, like totally cold email pitched. I was like, hey guys, like we have almost no money, but this is a cool project. You should check it out. It was a better written email than that, but effectively. And they actually got back to us the next day and said, yeah, come on in, we'll talk about it. And then they took on the project, and the sound mix is done by Craig Mann, who just won an Oscar for Whiplash, and like all these professional people that were like, this is fun, yeah, we can fit this in somewhere in between some other projects. So we were able to really pursue a really professional route with that, but we took the time to do it. Like as you can tell, Rob has an incredible base of technical knowledge, and we made sure to respect that. Instead of saying, let's get it done right now, let's do it correctly because it'll pay off. And it has. We've been in over like 65 festivals now. It's in 2 more this weekend. It's been all over the world, and
I think
it's still going around.
we're playing in Burbank this weekend, and
Atlanta.
So if you want to go see it
and
again.
one in Atlanta as well.
Bring your Burbank friends. We always end with kind of like the golden nugget question. So we'll start on the end and go, for first-time producers, what would you recommend them, one thing that don't forget? And then we'll go writer and then director. Just kind of like if you remember one thing, remember this about being a first-timer.
I think the most important thing is if you want to do something, you should just do it. Oftentimes with this project or with many other projects that I produced, people have always been like, oh, it's too ambitious, or you don't have the money, or you just can't do it. But I think Valiant's a prime example of if you're just passionate and you really pursue the project and really give it devotion, other people sense that. And that, might sound very fantastical, but at the same time, here's a prime example of it actually functioning. So I think if you want to do something, you should just try to do it. And I think that you will find your way.
As a writer?
I know it's going to sound a little trite, but just keep working on things. We spent 2 years on this script. We went through like countless drafts. There was a couple times when I was ready to give up on it because I felt some serious problems with it, but in the end it all came through. So just don't give up on your projects just because they tend to be frustrating you in the moment.
And for directors, I think that a huge amount of your work is in casting. Because if you cast right and, you are on the same wavelength as your talent, your job gets so much easier, the work gets elevated because everybody knows what they're working toward. And kind of attached to that is know your lenses. Because, the talent is there to give the performance. You're there to direct people's focus and attention. You're not just directing the talent, you're directing the audience. And so if you know your lenses, even if you're just, you can only get 2 takes and you're just screwed, if you know how to jump lens sizes in a way that will sell the moment, even if you just didn't have the time to get the performance you really wanted, you'd be surprised what jumping from a 35 to an 85 will do impact-wise in terms of what it feels, even if you're sitting there going, I wish we'd had one more take. The audience will never know. So
I think that's a good place to end. Let's give him a hand and say thanks.